So in reading 2, we're looking at the American legal system and the U.S. Constitution. The American legal system, as I mentioned last week, is sort of a hybrid. It contains elements of the common law system. It contains elements of the civil law system. That is, we're becoming more codified as things go on. And, best of all, it incorporates a really neat piece of draftsmanship called the United States Constitution. A remarkable document, and I will spare you my usual mooning over the founders, who were just absolutely brilliant. Anyway, there are some general concepts that you should be looking at. First of all, jurisdiction. Courts have to have territorial jurisdiction. They also need to have subject matter jurisdiction. If courts don't act within the scope of their authority, their legitimacy goes down the tubes, and it makes it more difficult for their orders to be enforced. Another concept that we take for granted in this country is judicial review. I sometimes have classes try to find where judicial review is mentioned in the Constitution. It's a trick question because it isn't. Whoa. It was based on old custom through English courts, and basically it provides a means of assessing whether laws or actions of a governmental authority are appropriate. So, we take it for granted. It's sitting there, and it's one of the reasons the courts have to remain neutral and aren't meant to be a political arm. Finally, there's the matter of standing. I just noticed that in my notes. Basically, our system isn't built on hypotheticals. There has to be a party to the case with something to lose, and this has its roots back in our common law system, where that person was, where the person with something to lose was trusted to advance the best arguments for his or her side. And the reason that was so important was because the doctrines made up in that case were going to carry on into the future. So standing, again, you couldn't, for example, bring suit on my behalf if you felt that I'd been wronged. It's better that I be left to my own devices. As far as the U.S. Constitution, one really big thing to talk about is due process of law. In the Dartmouth College case, Daniel Webster talked about law that hears before it condemns, and he went on at length. But a more succinct way to consider it is that anytime government, either on its own behalf or at somebody else's request, does anything that affects your life, liberty, or property, you're entitled to 4 things. Notice, that is, something's up. What's at stake? An opportunity to be heard. Some kind of hearing. Right to counsel, maybe not appointed counsel, but counsel nonetheless. Basically, if there's a distinct liberty interest or something like that, counsel may be appointed. And then finally, a right to appeal, that is some sort of review. Those four things are very important. And I'm not going to make any current event jokes. I promised I wouldn't. Okay. The other thing is equal protection of the law. Law sometimes discriminates. If there is something that makes for a different class, there has to be a rational reason for it. Airline pilots. If you're an airline pilot over 65, you're examined physically more frequently than a younger pilot. There's a rational reason for it. Trust me. If you get over 65, eyes, reflexes, whatever, aren't the same. Okay, so it makes sense, to do that. There's a legitimate governmental interest in making that differentiation. If, however, you make a distinction that affects a liberty interest, then there's what they call the strict scrutiny test, where government has to show that there's a compelling state interest and that this is the least intrusive way to meet it. There was litigation back in the age of the draft, where it was, where someone brought suit believing that women should be drafted also, and the court deferred on the on the basis of a compelling state interest, providing people for the military. Okay, so those are the biggies. Hit that discussion board and keep on with the quizzes. And if you haven't gotten your paper topic into me yet, get it into me. I mean it this time.